The radio on my desk hissed to life, cutting through the hum of my office heater. 911 dispatch to Larkspur Fire. Trespassing complaint at Copper Ridge Lake. Caller claims an armed squatter refuses to leave private HOA property. I froze. Copper Ridge Lake was my lake, right in the middle of my ranch. And as luck would have it, I wasn't just a rancher. I was the county's volunteer fire chief, sitting 10 feet from that very dispatch console. The caller's name popped up on the screen, and I almost laughed. Deirdre Veneer, the HOA president who'd been trying to carve pieces out of my land for half a year. She had no idea her emergency was being routed straight to me. Before I tell you how this war started, let me ask something. Have you ever had a neighbor or HOA that acted like they owned everything you worked for? What did you do about it? Because in my 52 years on this earth, I've met some tough folks. Drought, blizzards, even wildfires. But nothing burns like greed, wrapped in community bylaws. My name's Flint Dockery. I'm a third-generation cattleman in Larkspur County, Montana. 640 acres of stubborn soil and family legacy. My grandfather bought this land in 1948, paid for it with savings from the railroad and a veteran's loan after World War II. Right in the middle of it sits Copper Ridge Lake, 12 acres of cold, spring-fed water that's been in my family since the first Dockery laid a fence post here. Granddad dug the irrigation ditches with his own hands. My father stocked it with trout back in the 70s. I learned to swim there when I was 4 years old. That lake isn't just a body of water. It's a heartbeat. These days I run around 100 head of cattle, mend fences until my palms crack, and serve as the volunteer fire chief. A job. That pays exactly $0 but means everything when a neighbor's barn catches flame. My office sits inside the firehouse downtown, sharing dispatch with the sheriff's department. That little coincidence will matter later. My wife, Jolene, runs the library at the local school. Our 2 kids both work in Billings now, but they still come home for Christmas and the 4th of July barbecue. My father, Hank Dockery, 91 years old and tougher than a rusted nail, lives in the guest cabin overlooking the water. Every morning he walks down to the dock, leans on his cane, and casts a line like he's done since I was a boy. Mornings on the ranch smell like pine sap, wet dirt, and diesel from the tractor. I brew coffee on a beat-up percolator that's older than my marriage, one of those that could hold a spoon upright from sheer strength alone. It's a simple, honest life. Or at least it was. That piece shattered 5 years ago. An 80-acre parcel east of my fence line got sold to a developer out of Bozeman. He split it into 12 luxury home lots and branded the place Copper Ridge Estates, even borrowed the name from my lake like he owned the right to it. Each house sold for around $850,000 to folks fleeing California, Seattle, and anywhere else where space was too expensive to breathe. Before the paint had even dried, the homeowners banded together into a homeowners association, complete with thick rulebooks, bylaws, and fines for having the wrong color mailbox. From their deck railings, those new arrivals could see my lake through the pines, maybe a quarter-mile away, but they couldn't touch it. The deed lines were ironclad. The water was mine, the shore was mine, the land surrounding it was mine. At first, it was fine. The retirees and remote workers would wander up to the fence, curious, asking if they could fish or picnic near the water. I'd show them the county maps, smile politely, and explain it was private property. Most respected that. A few grumbled, but they moved on. Then she arrived. Deirdre Veneer, 58 years old, recently divorced, ex-corporate HR from some tech company in San Jose. She bought the corner lot and brought with her the kind of energy that smells like scented candles and control issues. She drove a white Tesla with a license plate that read Lake QT1. I wish I was making that up. And she smiled like every word she said came with an invisible asterisk. She talked about community harmony and collective good, but every email she sent was CC'd to half the neighborhood and phrased like a legal deposition. 6 months after moving in, she became HOA president. Naturally. 2 weeks into her reign, I found a certified letter stuffed into my mailbox, thick as a paperback novel. Inside was a wall of highlighted text and photocopied maps claiming that a 19th century county document showed a public easement across my ranch to the lake. She demanded that I allow HOA members a 5-foot-wide walking trail, seasonal dock rights, and access for shared recreational use. If I didn't respond within 30 days, she threatened legal action. I paid for my own surveyor and a title. Attorney to shut it down. Cost me $3,200. The county clerk confirmed what I already knew. No such easement ever existed. Never in 1889, never after. I sent Deirdre the report politely, expecting that would end it. She didn't apologize. She didn't even acknowledge being wrong. Instead, she pivoted. That's when my quiet ranch life turned into a slow-motion war. A couple of weeks later, another envelope landed in my mailbox, shorter but nastier. She now claimed my fence line was wrong, said I was encroaching onto HOA common land and had been stealing their property for years. I laughed out loud when I read it, right up until I realized she was serious. She had already hired her own surveyor, some out-of-state guy I'd never heard of, the kind who doesn't care about truth so long as the check clears. I was fixing a broken hinge on a cattle pen one Tuesday when I heard voices out by the gate. When I stepped outside, the sun hit me square in the eyes, and there they were. 4 people marching straight across my land with cameras, tripods, and clipboards. 2 men in loafers, 1 woman in yoga pants, and the surveyor in a neon vest. And at the front, like a general leading her troops, Deirdre Veneer. I walked up slowly, wiping grease from my hands. "This is private property," I said evenly. "You don't have permission to be here." She turned to me with that sugar-sweet smile that somehow felt like an insult. "We're on the disputed boundary, Flint. Our surveyor has every right to verify the property line." "No," I said. "He doesn't. Not without my consent or a court order." She pulled out her phone and started filming. "Go ahead," she said. "We're documenting your harassment." One of the men nodded along like a bobblehead, gravel crunching under shoes that had never touched real dirt before. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. Instead, I took out my own phone and photographed every one of them. Faces, license plates, equipment. Then I turned, smiled, and walked back to the barn. They stood there for a while, confused that I wasn't shouting. Eventually, they packed up and left. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Greer Holcomb. She grew up on a ranch herself and doesn't take kindly to bullies hiding behind paperwork. When I told her what happened, she didn't even hesitate. "Flint," she said, "in Montana, surveyors can't set foot on private land without permission or a court order. That's trespassing, and it's a misdemeanor." She drafted a cease and desist letter that night. We sent it by certified mail and email so Deirdre couldn't pretend she'd missed it. I also filed a complaint with the state licensing board. Turns out her hired surveyor had broken the ethics code by trespassing without authorization. Within a week, the man sent a formal apology letter claiming Deirdre had lied to him about who owned the property. He threw her under the bus so fast you could still see the tire marks. The HOA board began whispering among themselves. A few even emailed me privately to apologize. But not Deirdre. She went online, posted on their private Facebook group that I had threatened them with violence. She attached a screenshot of me saying, "I'll call the sheriff," and painted me as some angry, dangerous local trying to intimidate innocent homeowners. By that evening, 50-something comments piled up. Strangers calling me a bully and saying I should be fired as fire chief. Jolene saw it before I did. She walked into the kitchen pale, holding her phone. "Flint," she whispered, "she's lying about you on Facebook." I read the post, felt my blood rise, and clenched my jaw. But I told her softly, "Let her dig her own hole, Joe. We'll bury her with paper trails, because I knew one thing for certain. She wasn't after peace. She was building a war. 2 weeks passed after the surveyor stunt, and I thought maybe she'd run out of steam. I was wrong. If anything, Deirdre was just changing tactics, trading trespass for sabotage. One cold morning, I drove out to check my back pasture. The frost was thick enough to sparkle on the grass, and steam curled from the cattle's nostrils like smoke from chimneys. That pasture sat past the county road easement, which legally cut through a corner of the HOA's land, a right my family had used since 1948 without a single problem. But that day, the gate was chained shut. Not latched, not locked for safety. Chained, with a heavy-duty padlock the size of a fist. No note, no explanation. Just an expensive metal middle finger waiting for me in the morning sun. For a few seconds, I just sat there in my truck, staring. I wasn't sure if I was more impressed by her boldness or disgusted by her nerve. Either way, anger won out. I keep bolt cutters behind the seat for a reason. 90 seconds later, the chain hit the dirt, and I rolled through. Checked my herd, fed them. Came back and left the broken lock lying right there, my version of a calling card. The next morning, new chain, new lock, thicker this time. Most folks would have blown a gasket by then. But I'd learned something from her first trespass. Document before you detonate. After that first incident, I'd installed a small wildlife camera on a tree near the gate, motion-activated, night vision, time-stamped. I didn't think I'd need it again, but I was glad I had. That afternoon, I pulled the SD card and played the footage on my laptop. There she was, Deirdre Veneer, 6:15 a.m., wearing fingerless gloves and a headlamp like she was on some covert mission. Her Tesla was parked neatly on the shoulder of the county road. The camera caught her muttering to herself as she fastened the chain. Let's see him try to access his back section now. I saved that video 3 times, one on my computer, one on a thumb drive, and one uploaded to the cloud. Then I drove straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Wade Purnell has known me since high school, a 60-something ex-Marine who doesn't mince words and drinks coffee so strong it could strip paint. When I walked in, he was leaning back in his chair, sipping from a mug that said, "Don't confuse your Google search with my law degree." "Wade," I said, setting the thumb drive on his desk, "you're gonna want to see this." He watched the footage, stone-faced. When it ended, he leaned back and sighed. "Criminal mischief, maybe obstruction of access. She'll probably claim she thought it was a shared gate." "You gonna arrest her?" I asked. He took another sip of coffee. "Not yet. Let's file it first, get a paper trail, build the pattern. Then we drop the hammer. That's one thing folks forget when they're angry. Law moves slow, but it moves strong when you feed it proof. Video evidence, timestamps, clear intent, that's gold in any rural property dispute. We filed the incident report, and Wade promised to send patrol cars past the gate twice a week. Then I went home and wrote Deirdre a letter that could have been used to cut glass. "Dear Ms. Veneer, I am removing your unauthorized locks from my gate located on my deeded easement. Montana law clearly defines interference with legal. Access as criminal mischief under MCA 456101. Any future obstruction will result in both criminal complaints and civil litigation for damages and fees. Sincerely, Flint Dockery. I mailed it certified. Any reasonable person would have backed off after that. But not Deirdre. She doubled down. 2 days later, word got back to me that she'd called an emergency HOA meeting. Apparently, she stood before the board, righteous as a preacher, insisting they take action to defend community property from me, the trespasser. When one of the older board members questioned the cost, she shut him down, saying hesitation would destroy property values. They voted 4-3 to hire a law firm out of Billings, $15,000 retainer, to pursue access rights. The next morning, I found a thick envelope from that firm on my doorstep. It was full of legal gibberish, hereby, forthwith, aforementioned, and demanded that I cease all hostile activities and enter mediation. That night, Jolene and I sat at the kitchen table while I read it out loud. When I got to the phrase hostile activities, she nearly spit out her coffee. "You fixed a fence and cut a lock off your own gate," she said, laughing through tears. "Real criminal behavior, Flint." I smiled, but deep down I felt it. That slow, heavy sense that this was turning serious. This woman wasn't just petty anymore. She was strategic. She was building a paper trail designed to make me look like the aggressor, and that's when it clicked. She didn't want to win in court. She wanted to bankrupt me with lawyers until I surrendered. But she didn't know me well enough. I'd go broke before I gave up 1 inch of my grandfather's land. The next month was hell. Out of nowhere, county agencies started showing up at my gate like clockwork. First came a man from the health department, clipboard in hand, apologetic smile on his face. "Mr. Dockery, we received an anonymous complaint about sewage runoff into the lake. I've got to take samples. Protocol." I led him down to the shore. He tested the water, checked the septic system, poked around for an hour, found nothing. Before leaving, he said, "Whoever filed this wasted our time. Your setup's cleaner than most." 2 days later, the Department of Environmental Quality showed up. Different inspector, same story, another anonymous complaint. This time, it accused my cattle of contaminating the water with runoff. The inspector tested 6 different spots around the lake and actually complimented my land management before leaving. "Sir," he said, shaking his head, "I wish half the ranchers I checked ran things this clean." Then came zoning. A woman in steel-toed boots showed up asking if I was running unpermitted fishing tours. I stared at her. "Ma'am, this is a cattle ranch. The only tours I give are for stray calves." She sighed. "I believe you, but we investigate every complaint. 3 inspections in 4 days. 3 anonymous reports, all baseless. I filed a Freedom of Information request to see the complaints myself. The county redacted names like they're required to, but not email domains. Every one of those anonymous tips came from addresses ending in acopperhoa.org. That's when it hit me. Deirdre wasn't just annoying me anymore. She was weaponizing county government against me, turning inspectors into her personal army. Each inspection stole half a day from me, half a day of ranch work, half a day of my life. And while I was busy proving my innocence over and over, she was spreading lies online about me being under investigation. So I did what she didn't expect. I documented everything. Every report, every letter, every timestamp. My attorney Greer built a file so thick it could have been used as body armor. We were no longer defending. We were preparing for war. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning. I was sitting in my small fire chief's office downtown, catching up on training paperwork, half listening to dispatch chatter. Then I heard it. Larkspur 911. Caller reports trespasser on Copper Ridge Lake property. Subject refuses to leave, possibly armed. I froze. Looked at the address on the screen. My lake, my property, and the caller? Deirdre Veneer. Rhonda, the dispatcher on duty, asked her to confirm her location. "It's HOA common land," Deirdre said, voice tight. "This man is aggressive and refusing to leave." Rhonda frowned, checking the county records. "Ma'am, county files show Copper Ridge Lake as privately owned by Flint Dockery." There was a pause. Then Deirdre stammered, Well, there's an ongoing ownership dispute. He's squatting on contested land. Just send a deputy." Rhonda looked over at me. I was 10 feet away, sitting at my desk, hands flat on the surface, calm as stone. "Chief," she said slowly, "you hearing this?" "I'm hearing it," I said. "That's my property, and that's a false emergency report." Rhonda keyed her mic. "All units disregard. Property confirmed private. Logging call as unfounded," Sheriff Wade's voice came through the radio. "Dispatch, I'm nearby. I'll document the call and mark it false reporting." When it ended, I just sat there staring at the console, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights. That woman had just committed a crime, live on a recorded line, and had no idea I was the one hearing her do it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing her voice in my head, confident, indignant, entitled. She'd lied so easily, so automatically, that I realized something deeper. This wasn't about lake access anymore. No one fights that hard over a pond for fun. She was hiding something. Something bigger, and by the time I found out what it was, she'd already gone too far. Sleep was impossible that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear her voice again, clipped, confident, lying into the phone without hesitation. I'd heard false alarms before in my years as fire chief, but never one designed to erase the truth itself. Deirdre had crossed a line, and I knew it. But as furious as I was, there was something deeper gnawing at me, the sheer desperation behind her behavior. No one invests this much energy, time, and money into a lie unless there's something much bigger underneath it. I got out of bed around midnight, careful not to wake Jolene, and went to my office. I poured black coffee into an old chipped mug and started pulling files from the cabinet. Everything I'd saved over the past months. Surveys, maps, HOA letters, court filings, meeting minutes. By 2 a.m., the dining table looked like a detective's crime wall. When Jolene came downstairs in her robe, she stopped at the doorway. "Flint," she said softly, "what are you doing?" "Trying to figure out what she's really after," I said, rubbing my temples. "She's not just power-hungry, she's scared of something." Jolene poured herself tea and sat beside me, watching as I went through every document line by line. Then, buried halfway through a stack of HOA files, I found it, the sentence that changed everything. It was in the HOA's covenants, the same legal packet that governs their homeowners' rights. Section 7, Paragraph 3. All residents shall have exclusive recreational access to Copper Ridge Lake for fishing, boating, and swimming, as secured by permanent easement. I read it 3 times, my stomach turning colder with every word. Exclusive access? Permanent easement? There was no easement. Jolene leaned closer. "Flint, that's your lake." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, which means someone promised them something they never owned." I opened my laptop and pulled up archived real estate listings. After some digging, I found the original marketing brochure for Copper Ridge Estates. There it was, glossy paper, big headlines, perfect photos, and on page 4, a panoramic shot of my lake. The caption under it read, "Your private oasis, Copper Ridge Lake access for every resident." My pulse kicked up. The developer had sold those homes on a lie. They'd written lake access into their contracts, even though the county had denied them that right years earlier. I dug deeper, searching county archives until I found the planning board minutes from 2019. The developer had indeed applied for an easement to my lake, and the board had denied it after my formal objection. The denial was right there in black and white. Still, they went ahead and built the homes, marketed the access, and sold them anyway. I leaned back in my chair and whispered, "Holy hell," Jolene set down her tea. "So they think they own rights that never existed?" "Exactly," I said. "The homeowners bought those properties believing they were entitled to my lake, because their contracts say so. And now they've realized it's false." Her eyes widened. "Which means they could sue the HOA." I nodded grimly. "Unless the HOA can somehow prove they've always had access. That's why she's doing all this. The trespassing, the complaints, the fake 911 call. She's trying to build a fake record." Jolene frowned. "A record for what?" "Adverse possession," I said, pointing to a section of the HOA minutes I'd printed out earlier. "See this? Their lawyer advised the board to pursue lake access through adverse possession or easement by necessity. And they even approved a $50,000 litigation budget for it." Jolene leaned over the table, reading it twice. "So, she's trying to steal the lake legally?" I exhaled. "If she can convince a court that the HOA has been using the lake openly and continuously for at least 5 years, they could file a claim. Every fake trespass report, every photo, every inspection, it's all to create that illusion." I pushed back from the table, running my hand over my face. "She's not just petty, Joe. She's desperate to cover up $1 million fraud." Jolene stared at me for a long time, then said quietly, "So what do we do?" I looked at her, feeling a calm that was almost dangerous. "We stop playing defense." I poured another cup of coffee and smiled faintly. "It's time to go on offense." The next morning, I called Sheriff Wade and asked him to meet me at Magpie's Diner, the kind of small-town place where the waitress already knows how you take your eggs. When he sat down across from me, cinnamon roll in one hand, coffee in the other, I slid a folder across the table. "I found the reason," I said. He flipped through the pages as I explained everything. The fake covenants, the denied easement, the meeting minutes authorizing the budget to secure lake rights. He didn't interrupt once, just nodded slowly, the way he does when something serious is brewing. Finally, he looked up. "You've got her, Flint. But the 911 call, that's already a crime on record. False reporting. I can charge her today if you want." "Will it stick?" I asked. "Yeah," he said. "But it's small potatoes. A fine, probation, maybe some community service. She'll pay it and keep coming after you." I leaned in. "Then I don't just want charges, Wade. I want her finished. Discredited. I want this over for good." Wade's grin spread slow and dangerous. "Then we build a case so tight it snaps shut when it hits daylight." That afternoon, I went to see Greer Holcomb, my attorney. Her office smelled like leather, ink, and old wood polish, the kind of place where justice feels possible. I laid the entire story out for her. Every photo, every false report, every video clip, every page of HOA documents. She read through it all twice, red pen in hand, then looked up at me with the expression of someone who'd just been handed a gift. "Flint," she said, "this is a legal gold mine. She's committed harassment, defamation, trespass, obstruction, and criminal reporting, all documented. We can hit back hard." "How hard?" I asked. Greer's red pen clicked. "3 fronts. First, we file a counterclaim against the HOA for harassment, slander, and intentional emotional distress. $75,000 in damages, plus your legal fees. Second, we file a professional complaint against their lawyer for pursuing a frivolous case. That'll scare off any firm from touching her in the future. Third, we go straight to the developer. We show them the fraud they built this entire subdivision on, and remind them that if homeowners find out, they'll sue for millions." I blinked. "You think they'll cave?" "Developers don't survive bad press," she said. "We're not asking for money, just a public letter admitting the lake was never theirs. Trust me, they'll fold." Then she leaned back, eyes sharp. "And remember this, in a defamation fight, truth is your armor. Every lie she told is a nail for her own coffin. But only if you keep your proof clean." I left her office with a strange feeling. Not triumph, not anger, just clarity. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about setting the record straight. That evening, I sat on the porch with my father. Hank had his fishing hat pulled low, a cup of coffee steaming beside him. The sun was dipping behind the pine ridge, painting the lake gold. "Dad," I said quietly, "you've been fishing this lake your whole life. You ever keep any kind of log or records?" He chuckled. "Since 1984. Got a whole shelf of notebooks in the cabin. Every trip, every fish, every sunrise." I stared at him, then broke into a grin. "You're kidding." He grinned back. "Nope. Why?" "Because that's the final nail," I said. "Your records prove continuous family use for 40 years. That kills any adverse possession claim before it starts." He leaned forward, eyes bright. "Son, that woman tried to take what your granddad built. You bury her with the truth." "I plan to," I said, and the next morning, we began. Greer filed the lawsuit, attached 40 pages of evidence, and demanded a full accounting of every HOA dollar spent chasing my lake. She sent the developer a polite but terrifying letter explaining that their marketing had crossed into consumer fraud. By sunset, the developer's lawyer had already called her back. Within 24 hours, they agreed to issue a written correction to all HOA members, admitting that Copper Ridge Lake had never been part of their property. Deirdre's house of cards had just started to fall. But the storm hadn't reached full strength yet. She still had one card left to play, and it was the dirtiest one of all. 3 days after we filed the lawsuit, the weather turned cold and clear, that kind of Montana October morning where you can see your breath hang in the air like a ghost. I was out early checking my east pasture, the one tucked against the county road where my herd watered. The air smelled like frost and diesel, but something felt off. The cattle weren't moving right. A dozen of them stood near the water trough, heads hanging low, drool stringing from their mouths. One heifer staggered when she tried to walk. I'd seen sickness before, pneumonia, bloat, bad feed. But this was different. This looked deliberate. I called Doc Reardon, the large animal vet who's been patching up ranch stock in Larkspur County longer than anyone. He showed up in his mud-caked pickup an hour later, thermometer in hand and eyes already scanning the herd. Within 20 minutes, he'd drawn blood from 3 cows and was crouched beside the trough, dipping a test strip into the water. When the strip turned pale blue, his jaw tightened. "Flint," he said quietly, "you've got ethylene glycol in here." "What the hell's that?" I asked. "Antifreeze," he said flatly. "Someone poured it into your water supply." My chest went cold. "How bad?" "Not enough to kill them yet. But give it another day or two and you'd be dragging bodies." He pointed at the small culvert feeding the trough, the spring that ran under the county road before surfacing on my land. "See that? Someone dumped it straight through there. That's not accidental runoff." I clenched my fists. The only people with access to that side of the road were the Copper Ridge Estate's homeowners. I thanked the vet, helped him load his gear, and watched his taillights fade down the gravel road. My pulse was pounding, but my head was clear. If she'd done this, I'd have proof. I still had one unused wildlife camera, the same kind that had caught her installing the padlock weeks earlier. That afternoon, I mounted it in a patch of brush beside the culvert, hidden deep, angled perfectly toward the road. It recorded with night vision and sound, triggered by motion. Then I waited. 2 nights later, around dawn, I pulled the SD card and played the footage on my laptop. And there it was. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. A white Tesla Model X eased onto the shoulder, headlights off. The driver's door opened. A figure in dark clothing stepped out carrying a plastic jug. They crouched by the culvert, unscrewed the cap, and poured the liquid straight into the spring. Then they turned toward the camera, the headlamp beam flashing across their face for 1 clear second. Deirdre Vanier. I replayed it 3 times to be sure, each time my pulse pounding harder. Then I saved the footage to 2 thumb drives and uploaded it to the cloud. This wasn't just trespass or harassment anymore. This was felony criminal damage, poisoning livestock. By sunrise, I was driving to the sheriff's office. When Wade saw me walk in, he raised an eyebrow. "You look like a man who's about to ruin someone's day." "Maybe," I said, handing him the drive. "You need to see this." He plugged it in and watched the whole video in silence. When it ended, he just leaned back, eyes hard. "That's enough to charge her with livestock poisoning," he said quietly. "Felony, 10 years max, 50 grand fine." He stood, jaw tight. "This isn't some property spat anymore, Flint. This is serious criminal conduct. Can we prove intent?" I asked. "Between the footage, the antifreeze brand, and the vet's report?" "Yeah, we can prove it." He grabbed his radio. "I'm calling in a search warrant." A few hours later, his deputies hit her property. I wasn't there, but Wade called me once it was done. They found everything. Half-empty jug of the same antifreeze brand, a plastic funnel with residue, and a pair of stained work gloves stuffed in a garbage bag. "She even kept the evidence," Wade said. "Criminals always think they're smarter than they are." Then he paused. "Flint, you want me to arrest her now or wait until after your mediation next week?" I thought about it. Arresting her early might let her play the victim. But if she walked into that mediation thinking she still had the upper hand, the fall would hit harder. "Wait," I said. "Let her walk in confident. Then take her down in front of everyone." Wade gave a low chuckle. "You've got a mean streak, Dockery." I stared out the window. "She poisoned my cattle, Wade. I'd say she earned it. But before we could move, she made one more desperate play. That night, Deirdre called another emergency HOA meeting. Word got to me through one of the few board members who'd already started doubting her, a retired accountant named Jim who'd quietly been feeding my lawyer information. According to him, she was in full panic mode. She told the board they needed to settle immediately. She proposed paying me $30,000 from HOA funds to resolve the misunderstanding and prevent further escalation. Jim said 2 board members resigned on the spot. One of them reportedly told her, "We're not funding your crimes," but she still convinced the rest to approve the payout, spinning a tale about me being vindictive, about Wade being biased because of our long friendship, and about standing strong against local intimidation. The HOA was crumbling from the inside, but Deirdre still clung to her throne like a cornered animal. That night, Jim sent Greer an email. She's panicking, threatening to sue anyone who tries to remove her as president. Most of us want her gone, but she's unstable. Please end this. I read his message, feeling something colder than anger. The kind of stillness you get before a storm breaks. 24 hours. That's all we needed. The mediation was set for the next morning. Then she went nuclear. The night before mediation, she called a TV station out of Billings, one of those regional channels that loves small-town scandals and corruption exposés. She pitched them a story. Wealthy rancher uses power and connections to bully retirees out of promised lake access. They sent a reporter. Young guy, early 20s, hair too neat for Montana wind. He showed up at her house with a camera crew that afternoon. I heard about it when one of the neighbors called. "Flint, she's got a news crew here. She's giving interviews." I called Greer from the truck. "She's talking to the media." "Should I respond?" Greer didn't miss a beat. "If they contact you, yes, but do it right. Give them evidence." 2 hours later, my phone rang. "Mr. Dockery? This is Trevor from Channel 7 News. I'm working on a piece about your dispute with Copper Ridge Estates. Would you be willing to comment?" "No cameras," I said, "but you can have the documents. We met at a cafe downtown." He came in confident, left pale. I handed him a folder 6 inches thick. The trespass photos, the 911 recording, the harassment timeline, the water tests, the search warrant return. He flipped page after page, muttering, "Holy hell." "She told me you threatened her," he said quietly. "That the sheriff protects you because you're one of the boys." I smiled thinly. "And what do those papers tell you?" He tapped the folder. "They tell me she's been running a harassment campaign and poisoned your cattle." He asked to use it for the story. I nodded. "Tell the truth. That's all I ask." The next evening, the story aired on the 6 o'clock news. It opened with sweeping drone footage of Copper Ridge Estates, million-dollar homes under a golden sky, then cut to the anchor's solemn voice. What began as a property dispute has escalated into criminal allegations, false reports, and felony livestock poisoning. They played clips of Deirdre's interview, her voice cracking as she claimed to be the victim, followed by the evidence, the gate lock. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Didn't sleep much. I spent half the night staring at the ceiling, thinking about my grandfather digging ditches by hand, about my dad keeping those fishing logs all those years. They had both fought their own battles for this land, and now it was my turn to finish one. By the time the sun broke the horizon, I was dressed in clean jeans, a pressed ranch shirt, and my best boots, not for show but for respect. This wasn't about revenge. It was about setting things right. The county commissioner's office sat in an old brick building downtown, the kind that smelled like stale coffee and linoleum wax. When I walked in, the conference room was already full. At one side of the long table sat Deirdre Veneer and her lawyer, a nervous-looking man from Billings who kept straightening his tie and avoiding eye contact. On the other side sat Greer Holcomb, my attorney, calm and unreadable. I took the seat beside her. In the back of the room stood Sheriff Wade, arms crossed over his uniform, and beside him Patricia Carr, the county attorney, ready to observe. A court reporter sat quietly in the corner, hands poised over her stenography machine. The atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. Deirdre looked hollow. Dark circles under her eyes, makeup caked on to hide the damage. She was trembling slightly as she arranged her papers, her composure unraveling before we'd even begun. The county commissioner, Albert Kohler, a retired judge with a voice like gravel, called the meeting to order. "This is an informal mediation regarding property disputes and related criminal allegations between Mr. Flint Dockery and the Copper Ridge Estates HOA." He glanced at me. "Mr. Dockery, you requested this hearing. Please begin." I stood up slowly, palms flat on the table. "Commissioner," I said evenly, "with respect, I'm not here to negotiate. I'm here to present evidence, so everyone in this room understands exactly what's been happening on my property for the past 6 months." Deirdre's lawyer started to protest, but Kohler raised a hand. "Let him speak." I nodded to Greer, who connected my laptop to the projector. The screen flickered on behind me, bright against the beige walls. "First," I said, clicking the remote, "trespassing." The room watched as the footage played. Deirdre and her board members crossing my fence line with cameras and tripods, ignoring my warnings. Their faces were crystal clear. "Second," I said, clicking again, "obstruction of access." The video shifted to the wildlife footage. Deirdre, 6 in the morning, padlocking my gate while muttering about keeping me from my own land. The timestamp glowed in the corner. A few of the HOA board members sitting along the sidewall dropped their eyes to the floor. "Third," I said, my voice steady, "false emergency reporting." The 911 recording played through the room's speakers. Her voice filled the air, calm, clipped, and absolutely certain. "There's a trespasser on HOA property, possibly armed." Then came the dispatcher's correction. "Ma'am, county records show that land belongs to Mr. Flint Dockery." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could feel the tension shift, the slow realization among everyone present that this wasn't rumor anymore. It was fact. I spoke quietly. I was sitting 10 feet from the dispatcher when she made that call. I heard her lie in real time. Patricia Carr, the county attorney, scribbled something in her notebook. "Fourth," I continued, "harassment through coordinated false complaints." Greer brought up a timeline. 3 different inspections from 3 county agencies, all triggered within 48 hours, all originating from emails ending in copperhoa.org. Each investigation found nothing, but the pattern is clear. "Fifth," I said, "the motive." The projector filled with an image of the HOA's own meeting minutes, highlighting the section authorizing a $50,000 litigation budget to secure lake access via adverse possession. Then came the developer's glossy brochure, that shiny photograph of my lake with the caption, "Your private oasis." She wasn't fighting for recreation, I said. She was trying to cover up a lie, that this HOA was built on false promises of lake access. Every action she took was an attempt to rewrite history and shift the cost of that fraud onto me. Nobody moved. Even Deirdre's lawyer had gone still, staring at the screen. "Finally," I said softly, "felony livestock poisoning." The video changed one last time. The culvert camera footage. A white Tesla pulling to the roadside at night. A figure stepping out. A plastic jug. A liquid poured into the spring feeding my herd. Then the headlamp beam caught her face for one clear second. Deirdre gasped quietly, audible even over the projector hum. The next slides came fast. The vet's report confirming ethylene glycol. The search warrant return listing the antifreeze jug. The funnel, the gloves found in her garage. I turned to face her. "You didn't just harass me," I said quietly. "You poisoned my animals to try to force me off my land. You filed false reports, tampered with access, and lied to law enforcement, all to protect a lie you helped sell." The room was dead silent except for the rhythmic clicking of the court reporter's keys. Then Patricia Carr looked up. "Mr. Dockery, do you wish to press charges?" "On the poisoning?" "Absolutely," I said. "On the 911 call?" "Yes." "On the harassment?" "That depends on what the HOA does next." Greer stood, voice calm but sharp as glass. "The HOA has a choice," she said. "Remove Ms. Vanier immediately, issue a public apology, and cover Mr. Dockery's legal expenses, currently $18,000. In exchange, he will withdraw the civil suit, but the criminal charges will proceed." Deirdre's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering rapidly, but she shook her head, trembling. Tears streaked her heavy makeup. "I just wanted access," she said weakly. "The homeowners were promised. It wasn't fair." That's when Sheriff Wade stepped forward. "Miss Vanier," he said, voice low but firm, You are under arrest for criminal poisoning of livestock under Montana Code 811101 and for filing a false emergency report. You have the right to remain silent. 2 deputies entered from the hallway. The click of the handcuffs echoed through the room. She sobbed as they pulled her to her feet. Her lawyer sat frozen, hands clasped tight as the deputies led her out. When the door closed, the silence that followed felt like gravity itself. The 3 remaining board members exchanged looks. Finally, one, the same woman who'd hidden her face earlier, spoke up, voice shaking. We accept your terms. Effective immediately, Ms. Veneer is removed as HOA president. We'll issue a formal apology and cover Mr. Dockery's legal fees. I nodded slowly. I never had a problem with any of you, I said. Only with someone who thought rules gave her the right to steal. Commissioner Kohler cleared his throat. This mediation is concluded. Criminal charges will proceed separately. Mr. Dockery, Ms. Holcomb, thank you for your documentation. Greer gathered the files into her briefcase, snapped it shut, and stood. We walked out together into the crisp October air. She stopped beside my truck and looked at me. How do you feel? I thought for a second. Tired, I said, but relieved. Maybe now I can just get back to fixing fences instead of fighting wars. She smiled faintly. You didn't just win, Flint. You showed everyone that calm persistence beats rage every time. I nodded, looking back at the courthouse doors. Through the glass, I could see Sheriff Wade talking to reporters, the weight of justice finally shifting in the right direction. She made her choices, I said quietly. I just made sure she faced them. 3 months later, it was over. Deirdre took a plea deal. 2 years probation, 6 months of community service, $25,000 in restitution paid directly to me, and loss of her real estate license. She sold her house at a $90,000 loss and left the state. Last I heard, she was living in Arizona, far away from lakes, fences, and neighbors who remember. The HOA kept their promise. They paid every cent of my legal fees, $18,000, and published a public apology in the county paper. It read in part, the Copper Ridge Estates HOA formally apologizes to Mr. Flint Dockery and his family for the distress caused by the actions of our former president. Copper Ridge Lake has always been and remains private property owned by the Dockery family. Greer framed that letter and hung it in her office. She called it her favorite settlement of the year. But for me, victory wasn't about the money. It was about peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing the truth finally spoke louder than lies. Still, there was one more chapter left to write, one that would turn a bitter feud into something better than revenge. Winter came early that year, sharp, silent, and heavy. The first snow fell just days after the court finalized Deirdre's sentence. For the first time in months, the air around the lake felt still again. I'd stand out on the dock some mornings before sunrise, boots creaking against the frost, coffee in hand, watching the water glaze into thin ice. No trespassers. No engines humming from HOA cameras. No lawyers. Just the wind moving through. The pines and the soft groan of the lake as it froze. It's strange how quiet can feel like a gift after so much noise. Spent those early winter weeks fixing what she'd tried to break, both in the land and in myself. New fencing, new signage, restored the spring line the vet had marked as contaminated. But what took longer was repairing the part of me that had gotten used to fighting. For months, every sunrise had felt like a battle drum. Now it was just dawn again. One morning, I was mending the gate at the east pasture when a gray pickup rolled up the gravel road. It was Jim Harris, the former HOA treasurer, the one who'd helped expose her from the inside. He climbed out hat in hand, boots crunching in the frost. "Morning, Flint," he said. "Morning." I nodded. He looked embarrassed, eyes on the ground. Some of us wanted to come sooner, but, well, didn't seem right until the dust settled. He held out a folded envelope. Inside was a check, $5,000, signed by the HOA board. "It's not restitution," he said quickly. "That's separate. This is gratitude for not suing the rest of us, for giving us the chance to fix what she broke." I looked at the check, then at him. "You don't owe me this," he shook his head. "Maybe not, but we owe your family an apology. We got blinded by titles and bylaws and forgot to be neighbors. That hit deeper than I expected. I folded the envelope, handed it back to him. Keep it. Use it to plant trees around the lake. Something that'll last longer than fences. Jim's eyes softened. You sure? I smiled faintly. Money didn't start this and it won't fix it. But planting something that grows, that's a better kind of justice. He nodded slowly, tucking the envelope back into his jacket. We'll do that, Flint, I promise. That spring they did. I watched from the hill as the new HOA board showed up in work boots and gloves, planting young aspens along the northern bank, bright green leaves trembling in the wind. They waved when they saw me. I waved back. No words were needed. The land itself was healing. A month later, I got a call from Sheriff Wade. He was retiring, finally hanging up the badge after 30 years. Said he wanted to meet for coffee one last time before turning in his keys. At Magpie's Diner. He slid into the booth across from me, same gruff smile. Same black coffee strong enough to wake the dead. You did good? Dockery, he said, stirring sugar into his mug. Most folks would have lost their temper halfway through. You just kept stacking facts until the truth did the talking. Didn't feel patient at the time, I said with a grin. He chuckled. That's what patience feels like. Like you're about to blow up but don't. Then he got quiet. You know, we've seen a lot of neighbor disputes in this county. But this one's gonna be a story folks tell for years. Not because of what she did, but because of how you handled it. I raised my mug. To the end of HOA wars? He smirked. Don't count on it. But maybe this one will make the next person think twice. We clinked mugs, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world had exhaled. By early summer, the lake looked new again, like it had shrugged off the scars of human foolishness. The water was clean, the cattle were healthy, and a faint shimmer of peace had returned. Jolene suggested we do something meaningful with the settlement money. Not for ourselves, but for the town that had stood by us. So, we started the Dockery Land Trust Scholarship, $1,000 a year for any local student studying agriculture, conservation, or environmental law. The first recipient was a girl from town named Mara Elkins, whose father had helped Wade patrol the roads during the worst of the dispute. When she came by to thank us, she said, I want to become a land rights lawyer, to keep people like you from ever going through that again. That one sentence made every sleepless night worth it. Every now and then, I still drive by the Copper Ridge Estates sign, that stone monument at the neighborhood entrance. They've repainted it since Deirdre left, the ivy's growing over the words now, softening the sharp edges. Life has a way of doing that, covering wounds until only lessons remain. I don't hate her anymore. Hate's a burden that rots slower than rust. Some nights I actually pray she found peace wherever she ended up. But I also hope she remembers that lake. How still it looked on the morning she tried to take it. How quiet it was when justice finally echoed louder than her lies. Because that stillness, that's not silence. That's consequence. A few weeks ago, I walked down to the dock again. Same place where I'd scattered my wife's ashes years before this war began. The evening light turned the lake gold, and the wind carried the faint rustle of new aspen leaves. I stood there with my hand on the railing, feeling the cool wood under my palm, and whispered to her, It's over now, Joe. The lake's safe. We did it. For a long time, I just stood there, listening to the water lap against the posts, slow, rhythmic, alive. The past had taken its toll, sure. But it had also given me something rare. Proof that truth doesn't need to shout to win. It just needs to stand its ground long enough for the noise to tire itself out. And that's what I'd done. That's what the Dockerys had always done. The HOA war was finished. The land was free. And for the first time in a long, long while, the lake, our lake, was finally still.